Good afternoon. So this is the first of a series that we don't have a name for as yet. Let's call it the Creative Collaborations. And this is all about discovering how we think of creativity, innovation in our industries, at our work, and how we bring the best of ourselves into this. So today we have with us Kripa Subramanian, who has been a colleague and friend across multiple organizations, and I know enough about Kripa to ask some interesting questions. So without further ado, Kripa, um, why, if you can introduce yourself and tell us your story, what brings you to this point you find yourself in your life?
I think at this point of time, I'm very close to dropping dead because of COVID. But having said that, what I've been doing and how I look at myself is, I guess I'd call myself about 5 feet apart because wherever I go, I cause problems. I also solve them. So it's not just causing a problem and walking away, but I tend to solve them, which is what has helped me throughout my career. I started off as a hotelier. Absolutely love talking to people, love looking at things that are creative to an extent, but also have seen, if I look at it from today's standpoint, I've seen the whole personal touch versus what I'm doing today in the IT industry. So if you look at the hospitality industry, it's completely people dependent. And if I look at the work that I have been doing in the last couple of years, there is massive dependence on technology. So it kind of gives me both sides of the spectrum, the pros and cons of it, and it sometimes gets me to start thinking about where the overlaps work, what would be good for individuals, good for the society, um, and good value for money. Other than that, I've been working in the utility space for the industry, which is not necessarily the best in customer experience, which gives me a lot of work to do. But that's what I've been doing for the last 18 years.
And so, is there, or maybe have there been specific points which you can look back in your life and say those were turning points that put me on a path or led me to a point of discovery? Have there been those kinds of crossroads moments?
Oh, multitude of them. I think the first one was when I've been educated in India. So I think the very first one, which I was constantly told but did not experience, was spend some time educating yourself. So in my year 12, I spent a lot of time having fun, assuming that I was highly intellectual and my intellectuality would get me those grades that I wanted. And it was absolutely disappointing when I got the scores. I think there was no college I could apply for in the morning classes. I was looking at afternoon and evening classes. I was completely eradicated from all kinds of lists. So in India, you get the list one, list two, three, four, five, and BCom was out, BA was out. I kind of got completely pushed down to the lowest level of history honors, which is really something nobody gets. I think that was a massive learning experience. Thankfully, luck played a part, and I managed to get into the hotel management side of it, which is what I genuinely like. That was learning lesson one. I think that was about working hard, and education does matter, and certain degrees are disqualifiers rather than qualifiers. I think the lesson two for me was when I left the hotel industry and I joined the ITES industry. And it was purely, I had gone there to support a friend for an interview. I was not going to give an interview. And just because I was sitting outside, someone called me in and said, "Why don't you give the interview?" And they were taking interviews for associates, and I just happened to get in, give it. I had no resume, nothing. Purely on confidence, I think I got the team leader level, which and nobody was hiring for, by the way. So I think that was lesson number two, that it's what you project versus perhaps what you have as content, which matters a little bit in the world. And I think as we've gone along, I've had a lot of work related bits, but the life experience number three has been when I've had my daughter. And it has shown me a level of patience that I never imagined I would ever have. So I think those are the three key life learning lessons for me. I think the biggest lesson for me has been about me. I always thought I would be a very cool parent, but I'm doing a lot of things that I did not approve of my parents, and it just comes naturally. It's the Indian thing. It's imbibed in me, and how much ever I try to stop it, it just doesn't go.
If you look at the industry you work in, and you worked across industry, which is great because we often think that innovation happens best when you can cross fertilize ideas. And you've gone from an industry that I would think is the vanguard of customer experience, where people kill for that, where that overrides almost everything else, to an industry where it's almost an afterthought, I would say, in the utility space. Um, what's been your experience of at least the evolution of utilities over the last X number of years? Has it improved? Are we in a better place today?
Uh, we have improved, but very marginally. And the reason I say that is because if you look at the utility industry, it was primarily owned, or till about 2013, the big six had about 80% of the market. And for the big six, it was a bunch of customers they had. There was no connect. They were customers who were not thinking about moving from one supplier to the other. So they were primarily dormant customers, a lot to do with insurance. Or so, for example, if you had your home insurance, you don't really decide to change. It's a lot of effort to change it. So you tend to just sit on it and continue with them. So I think from that perspective, they have always been a laggard. Also, if you look at just the way the processes have been set up, there's no process which has the customer in mind. Every process is based on the meter, and the meter in itself is a contradiction to a customer. So even if you try to want to do customer experience, your processes do not allow you to do so.
Is there an innovation culture in the industry? Do you find that it's boxed into innovation departments? Where does it sit?
I think it's easier boxed. And like I said, because the culture is archaic, the way they would understand and run anything is that it's a separate channel. So it's been given as, so if you look at digital, or if you look at innovation, or if you look at any of these become small bucketed parties that are meant to do something, and they do it, but it becomes very difficult to then spread it through or to industrialize it. And that's the challenge that they face, because it's easier to make a change when you are adaptable, and you've brought the whole organization together. If you haven't done that, you're kind of putting something on top of someone and asking them to do it, but they're not necessarily brought into the process, and their mindset hasn't changed. So it and they're still stuck with the number of challenges that they see in their day to day to even start absorbing something new.
So there's certainly progressiveness to the overall sector, at least in the core energy production mechanisms, if not in the customer experience. Why isn't that translating? If there's so much forward thinking in one part, why does it not seep through to how we deal with customers? What's the missing piece there?
There is no other answer other than the ability for them to take risk, their culture, and their mindset. Unless they change those three, and it is not just, sometimes it's bottoms up, sometimes it's top down, but in a lot of cases it has to be a mixture of the two, and supported by your internal setup, which is giving proof points of what you're trying to do. So if you talk digital and you have your internal ecosystem looking at Excel sheets and putting their, they're still using multitude of calendars to block something, rather an IoT device, or if you are using archaic technology and you're asking them to talk digital, it just does not bode well.
Is there a need for rethinking the economics? Because in a way, the industry is very boxed in. You've got price caps, so you can't go higher, and you've got cost that are out of your control. So really, your negotiating space is very minimal in terms of what you can really do. Is that what prevents a big chunk of innovation from happening at any point, because you're just locked
Yes.
in?
Yes, A, it's logged in. B, it's the regulator giving them a lot of instructions on what needs to be done. I think they're effectively, when you talk about the retail space at least, they're effectively only a billing engine. There's no value add that's provided. So in all probabilities, you can eradicate that with a whole set of instructions that have come through by the Ofgem saying you have a minimum requirement. This is what you can build for. This is how many times you can build. So it's extremely regulated in terms of what needs to be done. I think the industry will change. So when you were talking about automotive and the economies of scale, it was established like that because the cost of getting energy from the more specialized ecosystems of fossil fuels or gas, etc., was very expensive. You had to set up, you had to go have wind, or wind is more renewable, but let's say you had to go into the sea, you had to drill. So these are very cost arduous processes that then needed to be transported. So you had a cost of generation, then a cost of transportation, and then you looked at the cost of supplying it from a retailer standpoint. But if you see what's going to happen as we go further on, regulations are changing. They are siding more with renewables. There's a whole government scheme set up which is looking at how to get to zero level carbon emissions or offset carbon emissions, and giving a lot of they will go away, a lot of subsidies to the renewable sector. Some of them will go away soon, but we're already seeing the cost of renewables drop substantially, which is why there has been a 20% uptake in renewables in the UK itself. So if you capture that and you go further on, the economies will just keep sliding down. And as renewables become more cheaper, you're looking at generating your own electricity. You're looking at storage of your own electricity. You're looking at being able to utilize that. Now, what makes that happen means that means you're looking at generation becoming 1/millionth of a cost from the big setups, because these are small solar panels or stuff that you're putting in your house. And when you look at storage, again, it could become your car which is storing it and then providing it. You could have separate battery. Again, storage becomes small, so now your transportation disappears, your generation will disappear slowly, and the ability to provide to individual people will become a higher element. And all of this kind of is what will bring that cost down and will hopefully get some innovation into the picture.
So we'll wait for that. And on the customer end, when you and I were in India, we saw our own colleagues looking at handling customer queries online in kind of chat interfaces, and I was really impressed by the quality and caliber of the kind of queries people were responding to, and the maturity with which they were able to handle multiple clients at the same time in a chat environment. Now that to me sounds like a step forward, perhaps not enough, but is that the right direction? Are we seeing that kind of asynchronous conversation, or fire and forget? I send you a WhatsApp message in the morning and you reply to me in the evening. Are those kind of the behavioral changes that you think will dominate?
So that's a very interesting question, and the reason I say that is because, like, we kind of put a baseline that cost to serve or operational cost was the biggest motivator in the retail segment. uh, Being able to have a chat is obviously much cheaper than having a telephone conversation. That's been well established, and because you can do multiple chats, because you can have lower set of resources, you can offshore it, etc., etc. But if you so most of the providers went down that route. What we are now seeing a trend, however, and when I say a trend, it is slowly erupting, is a change in the operating model. And that change actually is to say that a regular customer does not really think about their gas electricity. So they don't need this kind of attention. They don't need immediate solving of a problem. So can we notch down the operating model, and instead of giving them 20 different ways of solving a problem by contacting asynchronous, etc., we know they don't want it. They don't want to get in touch with us. So one, let's put the onus back on the customer, because a lot of the problems are because we don't get the data set from the customer. So if something is not coming back, let's route it back to the customer for them to source it, so they know that they need to provide something for that information to be correct. And two, more importantly, is to say, because it's not important, let's push them towards an email channel and go back to a 24-hour service line. So you're actually seeing a cycle where everybody was doing 48 hours emails and calling centers. Then that slowly erupted into 24 hours turnaround times and contact center plus chat. Then it moved to 4 hours turnaround time, contact center chat, asynchronous. It came to voice part. And now suddenly you're seeing that the cycle is starting all over again. And I think that's purely because of the inability of the retailers to think of their customers as customers and the ability to build the relationship. So where you don't have a relationship, you're effectively, you've got nothing to offer and nothing to gain.
Interesting. And that obviously is a picture you're painting of utilities largely in the UK. Is there any part of the world where there is a fundamentally different principle at play, where retailers, energy retailers, and their customers live in kind of happily ever after world?
I wish there was. I've recently been having a chat with my US colleagues, for example. And one of the things that I was told was that in the US, there are 18,000 water companies because they are all municipality driven, number of states, number of legalities. So the minute you look at 18,000, you're saying there's no one size fits all. The volumes are too low to make any substantial impact. Again, you're constantly pushing people into a cost arbitrage versus a customer experience bit, because you've divided the entire population, has been divided into such small tiny parts that you will never be able to get the proportion of scale that you would want to get, and you're restricted it to states because of regulation. Similarly, if you go to Australia, I think Australia is one which has moved a little further. So they're slightly further up the value chain, Australia and New Zealand, because they've started looking at solar and battery and all of those aspects with customers feeding in. In the UK, peer-to-peer selling is still not acceptable as per the regulator, but Australia is moving further down that direction. So if you ask me who's best placed, I would say them. But and then if you look at the APAC category, the likes of India, no one cares. So the guy will come, it's still manual, they'll come read your meter and they'll get you, you'll get a bill. All you do is pay your bill online, and that's about it.
Yeah, and it feels like a bit of a running to standstill kind of model. Um, but but if you could go back and pull one idea that you've seen work in the hospitality sector and apply to utilities, what would that be, or what might those ideas be? What would you borrow from that industry?
Okay, I think that for me is a good one, because for me, if I look at hospitality, uh, and if there was a customer request, for example, irrespective of what it was you had to do it. So if a customer, let's say, asked for, and I'm giving a very simple example, if they asked me for a type of dish that the hotel did not prepare, we would go all out to either see if the chef could prepare it or go somewhere close by and get it for them and do it for them. So we went beyond extra to be able to manage customer experience and make them feel happy. I think the ability to concentrate on the customer and build that relationship is what I would want to do here. I think that there's a massive gap, and we've discussed this multiple times. While people might talk about customer loyalty, loyalty is secondary. Even having a connect is primary. First you do a connect, then you make a relationship, and then you talk about loyalty. So I think ideally, if I would want to change that, I would have any customer who comes in, first of all, simplify the process. I think that's something that needs to be done. Uh, the industry is extremely complicated the way it has been set up, and the belief is to try to explain that complicated element to the customer. I'm not sure that's required.
Got it.
So if you simplify some of that and try to do what you can for the customer, it's just a lot easier.
So tell me, do you have a favorite innovation?
WhatsApp for me is a massive one, because before WhatsApp, I was dependent upon a phone, a one-ish phone to call India very often, and for them to be able to talk to me at any time. And all these price plans were extremely expensive. So I would have my mobile, I would have a Vonage, and then I think WhatsApp really sorted it. And if they go on to having 8 on a chat, It really solves that for me. So WhatsApp is one that I really like. I loved the Apple phones. That was a game changer for me, not because of anything, but the fact that the UI and the UX was so unbelievably fantastic. It's so intuitive. It's absolutely beautiful. I think the last, not the last one, but I can think of a few. In one of the hotels that I went, there's a lot of work, like I said, that happens behind the scenes. So you had the laundry, and you would have people pushing in big sets of sheets, etc., through that area to get it washed and ironed and absolutely crispy. But now you've got machines that have come in and they auto fold and put it, which is absolutely beautiful. So that's only because it saves time and effort.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. Last question, and I think I know the answer, but sort of exercise or frugal food, which end do you?
Oh, I have to exercise for my back, but frugal food, um, both have their reasons. So yeah, I think they go hand in hand for me.
Fair enough.
But I like my food. It's
Not
just
that
that
you
I'm not
noticed.
getting good ones right now.
I've seen you eating dry fruits in office for much of the months. I've never actually seen you eat a proper meal. So long may that last. It's clearly working. So thank you very much. That was amazing. And
Thank you.
we will speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.